Chat. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Oh, I see something. What was bothering me, chat? What was bothering me? Okay. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Dr. Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I am a doctor, nothing we discuss today on stream is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So if y'all have a concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. The topic is perfectionism, huh? Yeah. So we're going to have some fun today. I'm feeling good about myself, life, y'all. So we're just going to kind of hang out. Like, I'm not going to be in a rush today. There's like a lot of stuff we can talk about. But we're going to kind of take it easy. We're going to vibe. We're going to hang out. We're going to chill. And yeah, like, so just a couple of thoughts. So let's do this. Let's orient, okay? So there's a lot of stuff that's like hopeless about life. And I think that like things just seem to be getting worse, right? Okay. Bye, guys. Bye, love. Okay.
Bye.
Y'all go. Bye, sweetie. Like I was saying, there are things that are hopeless in life, but I'm feeling pretty good. So I just wanted to talk about that for a second. So things seem rough, right? So if you look at like, mental illness is getting worse, like suicidality, I think is increasing. We're seeing, at least in the United States, like more mass shootings, like people are getting like more and more upset about stuff. The world seems to be going to hell. Wealth inequality is increasing, all this kind of stuff. And despite advances in neuroscience and scientific research and all this kind of stuff, like it seems like some of these problems are kind of like not getting fixed. And I've seen that especially people that are like young today, right? So I'm a millennial, I think. And like the millennials is kind of when it started, but like things have been sort of like going downhill in a lot of ways. But I'm actually like really optimistic for a lot of reasons. So the first is that I think that we haven't really leveraged our advantages as well as we can. So we have these platforms of communication like Twitch and stuff like that. And, if the comments are to be believed, I've helped way more people than I ever could in my office, like practicing as a doctor, through some of the stuff that we make. And I also think there's all kinds of actually revolutionary stuff that's happening in the field of mental health, which we have not taken advantage of. So the core of the problem is, if we look at mental health, it's getting worse across the globe. And why is that, right? If we're investing so much in science and stuff, like, why is this not working? And I think the key thing is that we have, as a society, we are on the cusp of something that I think is really big, which is changing the way that we look at mental health to be outside of the mind. So I think this is a core weakness that we have. So I've been doing a lot of research on things like addiction, trauma, and even things like gut microbiome. So if you look at anxiety, for example, people who have anxiety disorders, they have a different microbiome. So they have different kinds of like bacteria in their gut that produce different kinds of neurotransmitter precursors. And that if you eat particular kinds of food, that will actually cultivate healthy bacteria that will provide you with more endogenous serotonin. So there's a bunch of stuff from the GI world that we're just learning about, like literally a diet that can be tailored to your cognitive experience, whether you're anxious or you're depressed or you have low energy or whatever. And that like you can actually like address that, not just by seeing a therapist, but that you can build mental health by using your GI system. There's a lot of stuff I've seen recently from the field of cardiac medicine, where we've learned, for example, that like the heart's capacity to respond to stress is impaired with people who have trauma. So you may say that's kind of weird, but aren't they stressed out all the time? Exactly. So their ability to respond to stress is actually impaired. So they're always at a high level of stress, so they don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. And we're actually learning particular cardiac techniques that can reset your nervous system to be in a lower stress state. And this is literally what some of these like evidence-based psychotherapies will do, like EMDR, for example. And there's like all kinds of stuff. So the other thing that we sort of know is like the immune system and the nervous system. We talk about mental health as if it's in the mind. But mental health is not just in the mind, it's in our entire nervous system. So the way that our body responds to stress, the way that we perceive different things will change the function of our autonomic nervous system. And you can reset that nervous system as well and improve mental health. And this is one area that we haven't seen yet, which I think we're going to see. Actually, before we get to that, the immune system is another place where I think we sort of know that, for example, like even pro-inflammatory bacteria in the gut, there's certain bacteria that don't really belong there. And our bodies have evolved for millions of years to have certain symbiotic bacteria. And now that we're eating a bunch of processed foods, we're cultivating a different kind of bacteria that our immune system doesn't recognize, because it's like, hey, for millions of years, these people have like lived in our house, and now there's a bunch of randos here that we don't recognize, so we're going to try to get them out of the house. So our immune system activates, causes inflammation. And there's even some evidence that there's a trial I saw recently where people who were given immunologic agents, so immunomodulatory like injections actually, will improve with depression, because depression has also been linked to inflammation in the brain. And the last system, and I don't think we've seen anything yet, but like I'm happy to make a prediction. I don't do it often. In the next 5 to 10 years, if we're lucky, we'll see a lot of research on the hepatic system and the liver's impact on mental health. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that the liver is like the machine, the primary enzymatic machine of our whole body. It's what takes the stuff that we pull in and turns it into the stuff that we need. And I think what we'll discover over the next decade or so is that there's actually a lot of liver-related things to mental illness and mental health. And so the reason that I'm hopeful is because I think that we've actually made a huge mistake in psychiatry and in psychology. So many, many years ago in the field of medicine, we decided to divide everything up and specialize. And so now what we have is a legion of psychotherapists, I don't blame them for this, who have never had any training in the body. And furthermore, medical doctors aren't even a whole lot better. So if you look at psychiatrists, how many hours of diet training for mental health do psychiatrists get? 0. How much nutrition training do doctors get? Very little. Right? So there are all of these different aspects that we're learning about the mind that and mental health that are like untapped resources. Because right now we don't approach things from like a dietary angle, right? We're starting to do some, right? So gut microbiome is really hot right now. And so I think that like, give it some time, y'all. Like it's not, I know it seems hopeless, and I'm not saying that a lot of things in the world aren't going straight to hell, but like we just have not leveraged the advantages that we have. And once we start leveraging those advantages, I think we're capable of so much more. And even if you look at this community, like what did we do here? Like think about what did we do here? Like what is this? What are we doing? So I recently got some statistics that we reach somewhere between 3 and 8 million unique viewers every month. It's wild. What did we do here? We see posts and stuff about like, you know, hey, we have like this wins PogChamp thing on our Reddit, right? Where people will post their wins. Like, hey, I finally saw a therapist. Hey, I finally set a boundary. Hey, I finally got a job. I saw something from someone. It's great. We'll take a look at it. It's a post about someone who signed up for coaching, right? And we sort of like, we just like showed up and we started leveraging the tools that we have today. And when we start leveraging the tools that we have today, we're starting to see impact. And so like, don't give up, y'all. Like we're just getting started. Like, sure, the world is like really, really challenging in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that your life is easy by any means, but we're committed to trying to help you. And like, there are a lot of people out there that are committed at doing this work together. And that includes people in chat. It includes people in our community. It includes people in our Discord. It also includes all the other medical creators out there, peer supporters out there, like wisdom gurus out there that are all trying to help you. And we're like learning more. And like, I think I'm optimistic today that we're actually going to win this battle, because I think we were caught kind of with our pants down. Like it was like a surprise attack. Like the mental health crisis that we're facing right now was just not something that we were like systemically prepared for. technology was not something we were systemically prepared for. COVID was not something we were systemically prepared for. The advances in AI were not things that we were systemically prepared for. And so it's going to like run a number on us, but what human beings are good at is like bouncing back and evolving, right? We kind of like conquered COVID. It kind of screwed us in a lot of ways, and we're not done yet, but we managed it. And I'm confident that like human beings have existed for a while. We haven't got wiped out yet. I'm sure it'll happen at some point. But like, be patient, right? The world isn't coming to an end tomorrow. And if that's something that ages like milk, well, then I guess I don't know what to say. Give us a chance, okay? That's what I mean to say. Okay, so what are we doing today? We are going to talk about a couple of things. I see one thing was actually deleted. Who knows? Okay, so this is what we're going to do, chat. How y'all doing today? Oh, the Mr. Grafixable is saying, I wish I could afford a house. Let me tell you, friend, that is one thing that, you know, I was flying pretty high, not going to lie. Just took the air out of my tires. So here's the other problem. While I can be optimistic that we can fix this stuff eventually, the real challenge is that the time it takes to fix these problems leaves like a generation of people screwed. Y'all get that? Like, we're screwed. Like, so I'm optimistic long term. But I think the problem is that like the 20 years that it takes to fix this stuff, which I think my kids are going to be okay. I think we'll have sorted out a lot of stuff by the time that they're my age. But the problem is it's the people that are halfway between, like me and my kids. Y'all are the ones, honestly, like y'all are screwed. Because this is a generation of people who's like graduating from college with tons of debt if you're in the US. If you're in like Europe, there's like war, right? If you're in the UK, there's like Brexit. And apparently people there like have difficulty getting tomatoes, right? Like, there's a generation of people, and y'all, we're getting screwed. I kind of lucked out. A lot to be grateful for. But it's going to take time. Like, I don't, like, and that's where we're going to do what we can to help y'all out, right? We can't get you a house. I wish we could. But we can't. So instead, like, we're going to do what we can, which is that you can't control how screwed the world is. All you can really control, especially in the face of these macroeconomic forces, is how you perform with it. And that's why we're dedicated in the way that we are. That's why we do the work that we do. So we get that, like, y'all are screwed. Okay? The world is screwed. But what we're going to do is our level best to help you optimize the way that you live. We're going to try to help you be the perfect self in a perfectly screwed world. But it ain't easy. And you have my sympathies because it's going to suck. Not going to lie. And I think part of the problem is that we don't even acknowledge that we're screwing a generation of human beings. We don't even acknowledge that. We're like, no, like y'all have it so good. We're screwing a generation of human beings. And the least that we can do is like acknowledge that it's a problem, because once we acknowledge that's a problem, maybe we can do something to fix it. Maybe. But as long as we keep on saying, oh yeah, like no, like everything's fine and everything's great. The stock market is at the height of what it's always been, like whatever. Like I know there's like a lot of good stuff out there. I honestly think there's a renaissance in gaming nowadays. I played like a lot of good games recently. So it's like there's bright points, but let's acknowledge that we're kind of getting screwed in a lot of ways. Jane Peanut, isn't every generation screwed for a different reason? Absolutely. But I'd also say the way in which people are screwed is also different. So there's been a lot of advances. So like infant mortality is at an all-time low. Well, I wish I could say that. That may not even be true. Generally speaking, things are better. But I think that one of the things, Jane Peanut, that has changed is that we're starting to see declines and upward trends that we've never seen before. So a good example of like why today is different is if you look at humanity, life expectancy has been steadily increasing over the last 100 years. We've been like winning the war on death. Literally. Life expectancy like 200 years ago was maybe like 45 years or something like that, 40 years. And like every couple of years, like things get better and better and better. Like dwarf wheat was invented. So now like we tackled a lot of like starvation. So people started living 20 years longer. Then we discovered penicillin. And then someone discovered insulin, right? And then like we started like chunking away at death. We're just like fatty crit after fatty crit after fatty crit. And now what's happened is life expectancy has decreased. Maybe even for the first time in the history of humanity. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know the statistics that well, but like, I don't think it was like, you know, like we were seeing a worldwide decline in life expectancy. So I think things are like getting worse in a different kind of way. And I'm not saying that they're, you know, I think in some ways there's some measures that people before us had it easier. There's some measures that people before us had it worse. Like all those measures are there. But I think the key thing to understand is that we can't relax. And we have to face like modern problems with like modern solutions. We can't, what used to work is no longer working. So 100 years ago, what killed us was too little food. What's killing us today is too much food. So the way that we adapt to the world that we live in needs to change. And so the key thing, I think the biggest mistake that we make right now is we've assumed that the strategy that got us to this point is the strategy that will work from here on out. And I've seen this, like there's a favorite, I have a favorite quote, I think from like college basketball or something, or no, NFL or something like that, where there's some coach who's quoted as saying like, the hardest thing to do is to walk into, you know, in the finals, to walk into the locker room at halftime and tell your team that the strategy that worked this entire year is no longer working. And everything we've done to be successful up to this point doesn't work anymore, and we've got to change it. And you've got half of the game left. I've seen it firsthand too. I've done a little bit of work in esports and worked with people that have had strategies that have worked. And sometimes you're on the cusp of elimination and you got to talk to your team about, hey, everything that's worked right so far, we have to toss out the window. Okay? It's hard. It's hard to do that. And this is what's happening societally right now, is what's worked just isn't working anymore. And we've got to adapt. Bjorn TB, great question. I think we'll address that in a post at some point. We'll talk about how to adapt. Okay, so let's maybe like I'm going to set up a poll chat. Let's see if this works. Okay, so we don't want this. I don't want to see myself streaming. I can't stand myself, chat. I feel pretty good about myself, except when I see myself streaming. And then it's like, no, bruh. Dr. K, calm down, bruh. Nope, don't want to raid. We're going to do a poll. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Okay? I'm going to share with y'all our topics for today. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Do we have chat? Okay, there's chat. Okay. So we'll talk about group coaching in a second. So I'm so tired of, if you aren't happy alone, you won't be happy in a relationship. Talk about this. Okay. And then what we're going to do is, okay, so question is, what do happy alone or happy in a relationship? Okay, then we've got a post about perfectionism and procrastination, and which I can't fit into the poll. Okay, we're going to talk about touch starvation. And then we're going to talk about, I don't know what this thing is. Okay. How does therapy work? Okay. What do y'all want to talk about? Oh, no. 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 Chat. Bruh. Okay, here we go. Okay. So we'll talk about all of them. Okay, let's do it. So touch starvation first, happy alone, and then perfectionism and procrastination. Okay? How do you date when you're middle-aged and you have no relationship experience? I imagine the same way if you're middle-aged and have some relationship experience, actually, right? The action doesn't change. That's what's kind of wild. Is everyone thinks that, like, okay, so how do I do this if my circumstance, how do I study if I've never studied before? And it's like, well, you know, you start as if you've never studied before. You start as someone who's like learning how to study. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think that there isn't. So it's like, if I've never exercised before, how do I get into shape? Let's use that example, right? The answer's still the same. There are some unique challenges that you'll face, but generally speaking, the way to get in shape is still the same. Right? I think this is where we tend to get caught up in the fact that, oh, like, I'm behind. And so it's going to be a bumpy start. Like, you may not know how to date, you may not know how to talk, and you just kind of work on those things. Maybe we'll try to answer your question in a better way. Let me think about that and see if I can come up with a plan about how to date if you're middle-aged. Okay, let's take a look at this. Okay. So we're going to watch this video.
I am really struggling with something, and I want to talk about it. But before I do, I need people, if you are a parent, I am really struggling with something, and I want to talk about it. But before I do, I need people, if you are a parent who was like touched out by your children, I do not want to see you in the comments. If you are someone with any kind of neurodivergency and it manifests or shows up as you not liking touch or people touching you, I do not want to see you in the comments. Okay? But I feel like I'm dying from like touch starvation, y'all. I don't get hugs. I don't know. I feel like if I were to get the kind of hug that I fucking really want, I would crumble into pieces. I don't. How do you deal with that? I really like need to be like touched, and I know someone's gonna say like, okay, go to the salon and get your hair done, or get a massage, or get your nails done, right? So someone can hold your hand. None of those people love me. None of those services love me. Right? But I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling with like, I don't get hugs. That shit is it could be like maybe a hello, whatever, maybe. But it's not enough. I don't know how how am I gonna go the rest of my life like this? I think that's really hard. I'm just really struggling. I'm really struggling. Like, I spent like last night just going like this for like 20 minutes. yeah, I'm just, if anyone else is struggling, what are you, what are you doing?
Okay. So that is some heavy stuff. And I hate to say this, but I think she is spot on. I think she's really tapped into something that I think we've sort of struggled with. So let's like start by understanding a couple things. The first is that this is not a isolated experience. I also think something that a lot of people don't realize is that this is also not like a gendered experience, right? And the other really interesting thing is, even if you talk about some of the stuff around like neurodivergence and people who don't like to be touched, I've heard a lot of people who are neurodivergent and don't like to be touched, but are also starved for touch. They're still longing for it. And they're in some ways like in an even trickier situation because their body, and we'll talk about this in a second, needs exactly what everybody else needs, but their somatosensory cortex doesn't even allow them to engage in it. Right? So this is something that's kind of wild, and I don't want to talk too much about neurodivergence because I think this is a broader problem, but like it's completely, anyway. So like what's going on here? So I think what we're seeing, so we've seen that there's a loneliness epidemic. Some indicators of mental illness are getting way worse than they ever have before. And what's going on? Like, why is this happening? Why is it happening to everyone? I've seen that like the percentage of people who have never been in a romantic relationship is rising astronomically. The percentage of people who have never had sexual relations is also rising astronomically. The number of people who have never had a friend or have zero friends is also rising. So I think this is going to be kind of weird. Like, we're going to talk about science for a second, but I think this goes like way further than science. So the first thing is, let's talk about the physiology of like touch starvation. And there is a ton of physiology to it. So, and it's not just oxytocin. So there's one hormone that's kind of like our bonding hormone. This is oxytocin. So oxytocin is what's released when we like cuddle with other people. Like when like we look at parent-child bonding. And when you like cuddle with something, like you get a spurt of oxytocin. Oxytocin does things like calms down your nervous system, reduces your stress hormone response. It's kind of like inversely proportional. And so like literally a hug makes us feel better. It's not just a subjective experience, it's a physiologic experience. These signals are also what allows us to be in love and to feel loved. So when you cuddle with someone, there's oxytocin and you feel love. It creates a loving bond between two people. But it's way more than oxytocin. So there are studies on touch deprivation. And the scary thing is that these studies used to be done in orphans. We used to have to go to an orphanage to find a group of people who were starved for physical touch. And we'd study them, these orphans in Romania, one of the most famous studies. Now, if we want to do a study on touch deprivation, where do we go? The average person. We no longer need to go to orphanages to find people who are starved for touch. It's a society where it's become the norm. So we see changes in cardiovascular outcomes. We even see changes in things like hemoglobin A1C. So people who are starved for touch, their diabetes is worse. We see, of course, changes with things like cortisol, mental health parameters like depression and anxiety. But when a human being gets touched, it does way more than oxytocin. And this is what's also interesting. There was one study that took patients and shocked them with electrical shocks. We administered electrical shocks to patients. And what we did there were 3 groups of people. One group was by themselves. One group was holding hands with a stranger. Third group was holding hands with a loved one. And the perception of pain, the way that the pain was traveled to the brain, the way it was interpreted by the brain's response to getting electrically shocked changes and is blunted and attenuated by human contact, and especially by human contact from a loved one. It literally makes the experience of life less painful. Like literally. It's not like some like, oh, like it may like it's easy to be, no, like literally there's like the perception and response to a simple electrical shock is attenuated by holding hands with a loved one. And what are we seeing? We're seeing worsening like diabetes. We're seeing worsening inflammatory issues. Everyone's going gluten-free and keto diet. Like, why? What's happening with society? Why is everyone so prone to inflammation? Why is everyone so damn starved for touch? There are two things that have happened. The first is that our society has become increasingly independent. We've decided that independence is king. And what we should strive for is independence, financial independence, emotional independence. The thought of being interdependent with someone else is something that we call weakness. So if you think about a problem in your life, what does everyone tell you to do with problems in your life? Fix them. Fix them, right? You should fix it. It's your responsibility. If you're broke, it's your fault. On the flip side, what we'll also do is we'll blame society. And so we'll say it's society's fault that you're broke. And both angles are correct, but both angles are missing something else, which is that when I hear you complain about, oh, you're homeless, that's society's problem or it's your problem. You know whose problem it isn't? It's not mine. It's not mine. So in our strive for independence, each individual in the world has absolved themselves of the responsibility of caring for other human beings. Because it's society's problem. It's the government's problem. Or it's your problem. You need to go to therapy. You need to get help. You need to start meditating. And by the way, if you need to meditate, guess what? There's an app for that. You can do it all on your own. How is meditation? How did it used to be taught? People used to go to ashrams. They used to sit in a gigantic hall and meditate together. So we've decided that independence is king. We've decided that the needs of the individual surpass the needs of the community. And we've outsourced the needs of the community to institutions like governments. I'm not blaming governments. I think they do the best that they can. They have their own set of problems. But this is the consequence. The second thing that we've done is technology. And we've decided through technology that we're going to meet all of your needs without needing to interact with another human being. So you want to meet people? There's an app for that. You can do it on your phone. You don't have to leave your four walls. You need food? There's an app for that. You don't have to leave your four walls. You don't have to go talk to another, interact with another human being. Good God. Now, even if you look at ride-sharing apps, they have an option on ride-sharing apps. We are so tired of interacting with other human beings, we can't take a conversation. So now I can select something on my app that says, don't talk to me. Heaven forbid, you're talking to me? What is wrong with you? You're talking to me? I did not invite you to talk to me or interact with me, and heaven forbid that you touch me in any way. When I was training to be a psychiatrist, we had this whole segment on touching patients. And it's a good segment, right? You have to be super careful about when you touch another human being and what that means. And one of my supervisors told me, never touch a patient. It is not allowed within the psychoanalytic. And it's like, that was hard for me. And I listened to them, right? Because there's someone who's crying in your office and like, what do I want to do? I want to give him a hug. But we're not allowed to do that, right? Because they need to manage those emotions on their own. Heaven forbid you hug them. And there's good reasons for that, okay? So it's smart. So I talked to other people, right? And I said, hey, this is hard for me. Help me understand. And they said a lot of brilliant things. So the first question is, if it's hard for you to hug a patient, that's about you. You should never hug a patient because it's hard for you to not hug a patient, because then you're putting yourself ahead of the patient. Brilliant. I shouldn't hug people to make me feel better. And if I feel like an asshole for not hugging someone, I should not do something to a patient that alleviates me feeling like an asshole. Brilliant, actually. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. But I also talk to people about, is it okay to hug patients? And sometimes I hug my patients. But there's a way to do it in therapy, right? You talk to them about it. You say, hey, like, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? Like, what does this mean for us? We explore what that means. But in the rest of society, we don't touch people anymore. I'm not saying go out there and touch people. But like, you can invite someone, right? You can ask people like, hey, you need a hug today? Like, you can do that. And I think this is what's so challenging is then we get into a whole other can of worms, which is like a good can of worms, like in the sense that it's valid. Because if you go around, you asking people if they want hugs, they're going to call you a creep. They're going to call cops. And so somewhere along the way, we become so independent that touching other people makes us uncomfortable. Like, we don't even know how to do that anymore. And this is what you end up with. A society of people who are disconnected. Because, by the way, if you need friends, there's Discord. If you want to talk to someone, you can chat. Right? And you know what? I hear you're feeling down. Let me send you an emoji of two people hugging. That's what we've come to. We've stopped hugging each other, and we've started sending emojis of people hugging. Like, what the fuck? Do y'all get that? We've created substitutes for human needs. It's not actually fulfilling the need, it's a substitute. I recently learned that there's a virtual girlfriend app. Don't have a girlfriend? Here you go. Right? And now we can get human-shaped pillows. And we can even get sexual devices. And we can substitute a relationship in so many different ways. And it's only a matter of time before someone takes ChatGPT and outsources an API to make a virtual girlfriend who adapts to you and learns like a human intelligence. Substitutes, 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 substitutes. Instead of like actually giving people what they need. And why? Because the individual humans today don't want to give people what they need. It's not society. It's like each and every one of us. This is what's happening. Right? And there are a lot of people out there who are, as we're watching this, are like somewhat like, give that lady a hug. And that's what I felt too. But this is the other problem. Like, it's great that we had that emotional reaction and that she was raw and she shared her experience that resonated with a ton of people. But just think for a second at what it takes to get someone to hug that person. She's literally got to put something on TikTok that explodes. And that's the threshold for human contact. That's the hurdle she has to jump to get a hug. We can't do that. We've got to lower the threshold to help other human beings. And so, like, what do we do about this situation? Right? I think it's like pretty simple. A couple things we got to be careful of. First, we've got to be careful about using technology as a substitute for human needs. Can technology be used as a tool to fulfill human needs? Absolutely. But it's crossing the line into substituting and trying to provide the needs in and of themselves. Second thing that we've got to do is we've got to stop blaming people for their problems and stop blaming society for their problems. We've got to start blaming ourselves for other people's problems, which runs completely alien. Right? And that's like literally why I started streaming. Because I was like, you know what? I can do more for people. It's not about like, I got frustrated with like certain institutions that are related to my profession. And I thought they weren't doing enough. And there are like good reasons for that, right? They were like busy with other things, like opioid epidemics that were literally killing people. And these were like dormant problems, or subsurface, not dormant. And so the only way this works, I can't do it by myself. I can't even do 1% of the work that needs to be done. Because what people need is hugs. Like, I can't hug everyone on the planet. I want to. There's a part of me that really wants to. I think it'd be cool. But like, I can't do this I can stream on Twitch. I can talk to y'all, but like how close can you and I really get? The only way this works is if we start accepting responsibility, like we as individuals start accepting responsibility for the needs of the human beings around us. And that's hard. Because if you start doing that, it can be painful for you. And so that's the core of the problem. Because what's happened in our society is we've decided we move further and further along the road of, if it's painful for me and it benefits someone else, I don't have to do it. And I actually agree with you there. You don't have to do it. No one else is entitled to your sacrifice. But that's the problem with society, is like there's a group of people that feel entitled to the love of others. That's not right. And on the flip side, if we're not entitled to the love of others, can we still give it? Can we still receive it? Like that's the thing, is like no one is forcing you. I don't think it's fair to force you, but the only way this works is if we actually step up as a group of people and we start caring about other human beings. So I want to share with y'all a couple of other just random statistics. Yeah, I think Prime, thanks for the raid. Appreciate it, bro. Nice to see you again. Prime, I think, is a fantastic example of someone who's out there doing the good work. I was on a little bit of a rant, so I missed the raid. So apologies if y'all have been here for a little while. So many times, and there's a lot of great comments, right? Because like, I think especially this community. So let's talk about, so Gambit Mojo is saying, also many times I feel like I'm the one giving, but no one else is giving to me and I feel drained. So this is the problem. Is that, as we said, human beings are becoming increasingly independent. And so I see so many people who are out there who are givers, right? I'm a giver. But if you think about it, if they're givers, what does there have to be on the other side of the equation? Takers. You can't be a giver unless there's a taker. So we've also lost reciprocity. And now you've got to be careful if you're a giver. Because why do people who are givers get stuck in this situation where they're just giving and getting drained? There are a couple of simple reasons. Number one is that you derive value as a human being through your giving. And the giving becomes about you feeling good. So I feel like I'm a good person when I give. And this is something that takers will take advantage of. Because it's a need that you're filling, and they're the beneficiary of it. Right? And this is also interesting because I think the same person commented that it's hard for me to accept help. That's the other thing that needs to change. So oftentimes givers feel like takers if someone helps you. And so you knock them away because you're the giver, you're not the taker. And then what you knock off the table is reciprocity. And when you knock reciprocity off the table, people are going to take advantage of you and you're going to get drained. So what else can you do if you're a giver and you're surrounded by takers? Start accepting what people give you. Because if you're not careful, what you're going to do is actually reject all the people who are looking for reciprocal relationships. Because you don't want to burden them. and they don't deserve to deal with your problems. And so what you actually end up doing, because of the way that you feel about yourself, is rejecting someone else's hand of friendship. And then who are you left with? All the people that will take and take and take and take. Right? So it's super hard. But if you're a giver, learn to accept. And then something beautiful will happen. If you can learn to accept, then we'll enter reciprocity. Then we start leaning on each other. Then we become interdependent as opposed to codependent. Right? I help you out, you help me out. That's when a bond really forms. That's what's really important for human relationships. What a lot of people don't understand about even something like developing friendship, there's research on this, that owing a debt, paying a debt is one of the things that bonds people together. So when I ask you for a favor and you do it, and then you ask me for a favor and I repay it, that is how people become friends. And the problem is that so many of us don't want help, and then we feel alone because we're missing one of the key things that is involved in forming friendships even. So it's tough. I get it. I really do. But if you're a giver, you got to watch out. You got to learn how to accept help. Great, 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 brilliant comments. Very insightful. Okay, so Missing Zero is saying, what if you're a giver, but the people around you constantly need taken care of and aren't capable of reciprocity? What a great question. Why are those the people around you? So this is what's really weird. Right? So like this is what happens. It's like a product of like evolution and adaptation. There are other members in your family. And why are you the one that everyone comes to? Right? So this is where people say, because they're all I've had. Right? And then, there are people, like if y'all are in like toxic families that require dependence, they need my help. And there are people who flee, like there are people who flee families that are dependent. And then what happens? The burden is left for the people who stay. And this is really hard. Because you don't want to abandon them. Like each person that escapes leaves more work for the people who stay. And then it becomes harder and harder for you to leave. Right? I'm not saying just leave. But this is a serious problem. And so then you just have to decide, is the path that you're going down going to work long term? Because what I oftentimes find is that if you have a dependent family, one of the things you've got to be careful about is doing things for them that they can do for themselves. They don't know how. Well, how did you learn? Because oftentimes families are older than you. And how is it that you're helping your parents with something? Like, where did you learn? Because they certainly didn't teach it to you. And I'm not trying to place the blame on the person who's helping, because I've been in that situation before. It's hard, right? You're aligning your values, you care about your family. But this is the kind of thing where it's like sometimes you got to let people struggle, right? If I don't do it, it won't get done. If you do it, they'll never learn how. And that's what's really challenging. It's hard to find that. And this is where we see this a lot with parents and kids too, where the parents are like, if I don't do the laundry, the kid is going to wear dirty clothes all the time. You've got to be willing to accept the consequences of not helping this person. And the problem is that what we tend to do in family relationships is we accept responsibility for their lives. And that is how someone becomes dependent. It's no longer about help. You're not helping them achieve what they want to achieve. You are becoming responsible for doing it for them. This is the key problem for people who are stuck in like family dependencies. It's no longer help. They become the ones helping you. You're the one who's the primary responsible person. And as long as you're bearing the responsibility for like 5 people's lives, you're screwed. Right? So in life, people will shovel as much responsibility on you as they can get away with. And this is the problem, is like, they're like, here, hold these groceries. And then if you say, no, 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 and then they let go, you have to be willing to let them fall. So you have to let people deal with the consequences of their actions. But oftentimes we try to protect our loved ones from the consequences of their actions. I've seen this so many times as an addiction psychiatrist. Parents are bending over backwards to try to keep this person from getting back into drugs. They accept responsibility. We're going to make sure that our child stays sober. And what is the child actually doing? Sneaking out and working against the parents, because the parents have taken all the responsibility. Child knows, hey, there's a safety net. So I can do whatever I want to. Mom and dad will be there to clean up the pieces after I screw up. It's really challenging. I struggle with that too. It's like hard. I don't know. Like when I say this is hard, the way I've learned how to deal with this, I don't know if y'all get this. I had years of professional training where people taught me how to do this. Like literally, like if you've got a patient who's depressed, how do you deal with them not showing up for appointments? Because they're depressed. They have an illness. They can't get out of bed. It's a very difficult line to walk. Compassion, patience, help, but not responsibility. Give them the other 3 by all means. But it is their responsibility. And then I do my responsibility, right? So what it is as a clinician. So if they miss an appointment and they're depressed, I'll talk to them even before they get depressed. When someone comes to me, and I'll ask, what does your depression look like? How does it manifest? Do you miss appointments? When you get depressed, would you like me to reach out? How many times should I reach out? This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I have the bandwidth to do. Beyond that, the rest of it is your responsibility. Hey, I haven't heard from you in 3 months. I'm holding a slot on my panel to be your doctor. If I don't hear from you in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to have to give that slot to someone else. And then they come back a month later and they say, I was depressed. And I say, yeah, I understand that. I'm sorry to hear that. If I have room, I'm more than happy to take you back. But there are other people who are depressed too. I'm not punishing you. I'm not saying that you did anything wrong. I'm not even saying that it's your fault. But there's a reality of the world that we live in today, and sometimes things don't work out. So 420 Neko saying, if someone gives up, I should give up on them? No. But you can't force them to not give up, right? You don't give up on them, but you can't bring them to not giving up. You want to absolutely support them, but do what you can. Compassion, patience, presence. Be there. But you can't force them into not giving up. You can't accept responsibility for them not giving up. That's on them. Okay. Shall we move on, or y'all want to keep just like going on this thread? So this is beautiful. So Seiko 5 is asking, what should the lady in the video do? This is where I'd say the lady in the video has done enough. She's done a ton. This is exactly my point, right? Who does the responsibility fall on? What should the lady in the video do? She's done enough. Who needs to step up is the people who know her in her personal life. They're the ones that need to pick up the torch. Great question. That's the thinking. Because what can she do? This is the whole problem. When it comes to relationships, we can only do so much. And at some point, someone else has to do the lifting. Oh, not all of y'all know the video? Here. This was, I've only been talking about it for what, like 30 minutes? I'm going to just link it here. You guys can check it out. Could you talk about touch starvation in relation to sexual trauma, other trauma that hinders the acceptance of touch? Yes and no. I'll talk about it briefly, but there's so much more. I cannot do it the justice it deserves. So this is a problem we touched on a little bit. So what's really challenging about touch starvation is that the need for human touch can be completely independent from a triggering response to human touch. So this is kind of like, it's almost like, if I have like a stomach virus, like an enterovirus or something like that, and I'm vomiting, I can't keep anything down. My body still needs food, and I still need fluids. Do y'all get that? Those are completely independent things. If I can't keep anything down, I still need calories and hydration. This is the situation that people who are traumatized and touch starved are in. They absolutely need something, but they cannot tolerate it. Very difficult situation to be in. We also see this, for example, in neurodiversity, where people will have somatosensory problems, right? Sensory issues that make it hard for them to touch. And this is the thing, like we in society, we want it to be fair. We want to say like, hey, like it shouldn't be like that. That's not fair. I need touch and I can't tolerate touch. Like how am I supposed to fix that if I can't handle it and I need it? And it's the same problem that people who have stomach viruses and are vomiting and need hydration have. Literally the same problem. It's not fair to them. And you know what happened to them? A lot of them died before we invented IV hydration. Then we figured out, oh, great, we can hydrate the body by bypassing the stomach. Now the question naturally becomes, what is the IV hydration of touch starvation after someone has had a physically abusive, triggering, traumatic experience? I wish it was as simple as plugging something into your veins and like giving you oxytocin. Chat has a lot of the answers. So one thing is animals. There's data that shows that animals can help us. And that's true, by the way. There are studies on touch starvation and things like cats and dogs. And even touching animals is sufficient. And that's where one of the things that we have to understand about trauma is it's about gradual desensitization to a particular thing. Now, the challenge with gradual desensitization is that it in and of itself can sometimes be traumatic. That's what's so challenging about exposure-related therapies, especially when it comes to trauma. So that's where I think a lot of it is like really, really, really good communication and tolerance and taking it slow. Right? So this is going back to like hugging your patients. Got to be super careful with patients who have trauma. Can't hug them for your sake, but you can ask. Right? So sometimes when I see patients who are being discharged from the hospital and they want to hug me, I will hug them. Sometimes that's also people who have a history of trauma. And so you got to take it slow and recognize that the responses of your nervous system, of your physiology, are actually protective mechanisms that were wired in a different situation. So if we think about things like exposure therapy, there's literally a sensory trigger that evokes a particular response. So if we look at PTSD for like war veterans and a door slams, they think it's gunfire and their body goes into high alert. So every time they're in the parking lot, people are slamming doors and they feel like they're back in a war zone. So there's a graduated level of exposure. So usually for people who have trauma and are need to engage in healthy physical relationships, it's about, okay, like what can you handle and what is too much and how can we take this slowly and let's reevaluate every step of the way. And sometimes this is something as simple as like animals, right? So the interesting thing if you look at animals, there's a really interesting physiologic thing there, which is that it doesn't trigger the trauma response. Because the trauma response is scanning for a particular thing. So it could be human touch, but not animal touch. And on the flip side, we sort of know this, right? So if I get attacked by a dog and I have a trauma response when I see a dog, but if mommy or daddy are there and they can hug me, that's not going to create the same response. Is this getting into distress tolerance? Absolutely. Right? So there's a very, very fine balance, which each human being has to figure out. Because if you do too much distress tolerance, it'll actually be, you won't be able to tolerate it and it'll be traumatic and make the problem worse. It's kind of like learning to eat spicy food, right? You don't go straight to the high level. You start low and you work your way up. Did you know that physical contact can also improve gut microbiome? I did actually know that. Yes. I know it's crazy, but yes, I actually did know that. Okay. So Geronimo2521 is asking, what if you're in a relationship and your girlfriend does not like physical intimacy, but you do? Is it okay to ask them for physical affection? I think so, but I think that asking them for physical affection comes later. So if you're in a relationship with someone, your mileage may vary. By all means, see a therapist about this kind of thing. But here's how I have approached things for patients that I've worked with. Is you need to have a conversation about physical affection. It's not even about asking. It's about understanding first. Help me understand what your experience of physical affection is. What does it do? What does it not do? Help me understand how affection is expressed in this relationship. Like, what is your love language? And then for you to also share with them what your experience of it is. Hey, this is what is important to me in a relationship. This is what physical affection means to me. This is what it doesn't mean to me. And then for y'all to try to problem solve together, how do we deal with this? And it's not just physical affection, it's also like spicy food. Like, hey, my partner doesn't like to eat spicy food. I like to eat spicy food. Is it okay if I put peppers in the meal? And it's like, have a conversation about it. Right? And you all have to understand, okay, like what is like okay between us? Like what do we want to work towards? Like what's the goal that we want to work towards? That you'll have to decide together instead of just asking for something. And then also, what is the pace at which we work towards that goal? And this is what people miss is when you ask for something, if you just say, hey, can I have physical affection because I need it? Now you're putting your girlfriend in a weird situation, and you're also in a weird situation, by the way, so I'm not like blaming you for this, because now they have the option to do something that hurts them or do something that hurts you. Right? So either they do it and then they feel terrible and then you feel guilty, or they don't do it and you feel terrible and they feel guilty. So jumping straight to the question is what causes the problem, because it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. Instead, talk to them about, hey, what does physical affection mean to you? Help me understand what's difficult for you. Here's what it means to me. How do we approach this? Is there a shared goal that you feel comfortable working towards, that I can feel comfortable working towards? And what are the steps of that goal, and what's the pacing? And also, like, how do we reevaluate? Like, we can come up with a plan, which is like, first we're going to hold hands. Then we're going to do this. 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 And it's one a week. That's the progression. But what if the progression feels too slow? What if it feels too fast? How do we reevaluate this? It's all about communication. The real tragedy is everyone says relationships are about communication, communication, communication. But that's all they say. They don't say what you're actually supposed to communicate. No one ever actually teaches you the communication. What's the secret to a successful relationship? Communication. How do I do that? Right? How do you actually have a conversation about physical affection with someone who is not comfortable with it? That's what you do. You say, hey, what does physical affection mean to you? How is affection in a relationship? How do you feel loved in a relationship? How do you express love in a relationship? You can ask those kinds of things. Here's how I express love in a relationship. This is how I feel loved in a relationship. This is what physical affection means to me. It's okay that these two things don't have to line up perfectly. That's actually fine. Even having this conversation, does it make you feel guilty? I love you. I care about you. I'm interested in moving forward with this conversation. But moving forward does not mean you doing what I want. It means the two of us working together to figure out how we can find some sort of happy medium that we are both comfortable with. Where do you think we should start? Carrie the Platypus is saying, I always feel so guilty for not being touched. Absolutely. Right? So then you're screwed for a whole different reason. Not only is it hard for you, then there's the guilt. Evernon is saying, what if you never experienced a relationship and you don't know your boundaries? What a wonderful... See, here's the thing. Y'all know what to say. That's exactly what you say. If you've never been in a relationship before, and if you get into a relationship, you can say, hey, I'm new at this kind of thing. I don't know exactly what my boundaries are. Can you help me figure them out? Right? And if you're lucky and you end up with someone who's caring, they'll help you figure it out. Okay. So are we just talking about touch and physical stuff today, or you guys want to talk about other stuff? Let's do a quick poll. And what was the other one that y'all wanted? There were 3 that were highly... Oh yeah, happy in a relationship. Yeah, we could talk happy. Okay, so it seems like most people actually want to move on. So let's do that. Okay? Okay, we'll do both of those. Thank you so much, chat. See, look, what did we do there? We communicated. Do you see that? We just did it. Hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. I'm noticing that a lot of people seem to be interested in this, but I'm not sure what to do. What do I do in this situation? Do I just decide as Dr. K? Shocking. We're going to communicate, right? I'm going to say, hey, I don't know what y'all want to talk about. This is what I'm willing to talk about. Can y'all help me talk about what we talk about? You see? It's cool. Absolutely. So don't just poll your partner about their boundaries. Poll Twitch chat about your partner's boundaries. Twitch plays Let's Go on a Date. How about that? So Twitch plays Pokemon. Twitch plays Let's Go on a Date. This is the thing. I know that y'all pretend to be degenerates and competent and whatnot, but y'all actually know stuff really well. Like y'all are smart. You're attentive. I feel like there's a lot of people in our community who struggle in a lot of ways, but I honestly feel like we get the best version of you. We really do. It's great. I wish I could end this by saying just behave in real life the way that you do in Twitch chat. But what I really mean to say is just behave in real life the way that you do when you're on your best behavior in Twitch chat. Okay. Let's move on. Okay. I'm so tired of if you aren't happy alone, you won't be happy in a relationship. Sorry if this is somewhat incelly, but I just have to say it. The only time I've ever felt fulfilled in life was the last time I was in a relationship, almost 3 years ago. The cliche comes from a kind place, but it is just not true for me. I have hobbies. I have friends. I'm mostly physically healthy, but it has been so long since I've known why I had woken up. I didn't expect this to get much of a response. Thank you to everyone who replied. I like the general advice. I have the general advice, so I won't continue to make it about me by giving more details. Awesome. So this is a problem, right? That a lot of times we get told that if you can't be happy by yourself, you have to be happy by yourself first before you can be happy in a relationship. But what if what makes us unhappy is being alone and not having someone to share our lives with and not having someone to love and not having someone who loves us? Are we supposed to be happy without some of those basic human biological needs? Right? Because let's remember that we're evolutionary, we're wired to fall in love. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And that part of the reason we're wired this way is because it helps us procreate and progress the species and all that kind of stuff. And so then some of us are out there and we're kind of living our lives and we're doing okay, right? I got a decent job and I'm kind of taking care of myself and I sort of pay my bills and I've got my friends and I got my hobbies and I'm growing as a human being, but I'm not happy because I'm alone. And then people learn how to be happy on your own. And you're I kind of don't want to because I really want this thing and it feels meaningful to me. And I want to love someone and I want to be loved. And am I supposed to give that up? So let's understand, first of all, why people say this in the first place and what they're referring to. And more importantly, what they're not referring to. So when people say you need to learn how to be in a relationship or happy by yourself before you can be happy in a relationship, this is important to understand. We have a lot of psychological needs. Some of these needs, what people will do is fulfill through a relationship instead of fulfilling it by themselves. And this is when being happy only through relationships becomes a problem. So when you are using a relationship as a substitute for other things in life, that's when it's a problem. And what we refer to, I think, when we say you need to learn to be happy on your own, is stop using relationships as substitutes for certain personal psychological needs. We're not talking about the capacity or the need to be loved and to love in turn. We're talking about basically everything else. So what do I mean by that? So as an example, some of us don't feel good about ourselves. We have low self-worth. We do not love ourselves. Sometimes when people don't love themselves, they will use the love of another human being as a substitute for the lack of love that I have for myself. That doesn't work long term. It can be healthy even in particular ways, we'll get to in a second. So I've also seen this a lot with people who are sexually promiscuous. Where they will use literally that bonding moment after sex when you're cuddling to feel loved because they get that spurt of oxytocin and that literally makes you feel loved. But then an hour later, the person is out of your bed and out the door. And so when we start to use relationships as substitutes for meeting our personal psychological needs, not our relationship psychological needs, that's when it becomes a problem. Other examples of this are people who will use relationships for some kind of like security, right? So if I'm using a relationship as a substitute for financial security or financial independence, if the only way that I know how to be financially secure is through a relationship, that's going to be a problem. So relationships shouldn't be substitutes for your independence, for your financial security, for your self-love, which doesn't mean that they can't be a part of that. It's okay to be financially dependent in a relationship. That's okay. It's okay to have low self-esteem in a relationship, but that should not be the tool that you use to fix that problem. For example, I can't pay my rent at the end of the month. I better find someone to have a relationship with who can pay my rent. That, I think, leads to unhealthy relationships. Sometimes it can work out successfully, but generally speaking, not a great idea. So when we say learn to be happy on your own, what I think we mean, or what I mean, is that you've got to be careful because sometimes it's easier to fulfill those needs through a relationship than it is for you to fix the problem yourself. Right? So I need a relationship because I don't know how to do my laundry and I can't cook for myself. So I'm going to find someone who is like a really, really nice person who can take care of me and can serve as a parent in addition to a romantic partner. That I do not think is healthy. Now, can there be a division of labor? Does everyone in a relationship have to learn everything in the house? I don't think so. You can have a division of labor, but it should not be used as a substitute. So now let's move on to like when this is sort of, so that's the sort of what I think people are referring to. But what about our relationship needs, right? And this is where I'm going to lean on some ancient stuff. So thousands of years ago, there's a group of people in India called yogis. And these yogis, eventually, they studied life in all kinds of ways. They didn't have they ran experiments and they made observations, but they didn't use test tubes. And they weren't reductionist in their thinking. So they didn't necessarily break something apart and try to figure out what it was. They looked at human beings. They tried to figure out, okay, what does it take for a human being to be happy? And later on, this is what we would call kind of like Hinduism or Buddhism, but it's not really a religious perspective. It's really honestly like more of a scientific perspective. And so they notice that human beings need 4 things to be happy. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. I realize I just tossed a bunch of Sanskrit at you. Dharma, duty. Artha, wealth. Kama, desire. Moksha, spirituality. So what they noticed is that for a human being to have a complete life and to be happy, they need these 4 things. So this is why it's kind of confusing for people, but like in the Hindu, it's not really religion, but they basically figured out, okay, like these are the 4 things you need in life to be happy. And they created texts about how to do these things, which is where the Kama Sutra came from. Everyone's like, oh, Kama Sutra. Oh yeah, like sex text, let's go. They weren't trying to be like memes. They were like, hey, by the way, we've observed that sexual pleasure is a normal part of human happiness. So we're going to teach a text on sexual pleasure in the same way that we will teach you a text on how to deal with anger, emotion, desire. What are the states of consciousness? How should you sleep? What should you eat? We're just going to add it to the list of everything else. So instead of this puritanical approach to sex, they just kind of acknowledge that, hey, it's like actually a natural human thing, and it's not even a natural human thing. There's even bacteria who have these F plasmids that will sort of have like some kind of DNA exchange between 2 bacteria. So it's like even life, every aspect of life has some amount of sexuality to it. Okay? They also developed texts called the Arthashastra, which, by the way, so is the text on wealth. So it's like, this is how to get rich. It's the original Sigma grind set, get rich quick, sign up for my, course to like become an entrepreneur. There's literally this thing called the Arthashastra. Artha means wealth. So this is the text on wealth. And it even describes things like what time you should wake up in the morning, when you should shower. It also says some really cool things. Like the opinions of others should be used for the way that you interact with the world, not the way that you feel about yourself. So you want to listen to the opinions of others to create a product for the world. Product development, listen to the opinions of others. But don't let the opinions of others cross the boundary from being externally useful to internally useful. You don't let it cross over into your opinion of yourself. This is the original Sigma grind set. Okay? So this is what they sort of said. They said you need 4 things to be happy in life. Dharma, which is do your duty. Now, what does that mean? We have a whole guide about meditation where we explain what dharma is. We've given lots of lectures about it. But essentially, as a human being, you have certain responsibilities in life. And if you talk to people who are unhappy, they're usually not fulfilling their responsibilities. Now, this is not the responsibilities that other people place on you. Like your parents are like, yeah, you have to take care of us. You're not allowed to ever get married because you're our child. What we mean is that a lot of people in our community feel like they have no purpose in life, right? Like, I'm not doing anything. I just wake up every day and it's like the same old crap. You can still have a job. You can still have family. You can still call your grandma every day. But if you're not like doing anything in life, that's a lack of dharma. Like, what's your purpose? What's your duty? What are you here for on this earth? And if you want to be happy, you got to figure that out. Second thing, artha. The yogis figure out. These are yogis, right? So these are people that are living in the Himalayas and like meditating and stuff. And they come down from the Himalayas and they're like, here's how to make money. They write the Arthashastra. And so in order to be happy in life, you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to be financially like independent, right? Or financially dependent with someone else, like whatever. Like you have to have your finances sorted out. Because in life, a lot of joy in life comes from stuff. And this isn't where we want to, and we'll talk about this in a second, but we don't want to be like so spiritual that we're not enjoying the things around us. Life is meant to be enjoyed. It's not like we have to walk around like eating unripe fruit all day. Like if it's like, it's like strawberry season now, like eat a delicious strawberry and enjoy it. That's part of life. Now we get to kam, desire. So this is another important thing. An important part of having a fulfilling life is having a relationship. So the key thing is that the relationship should fulfill that. That's the box it should check. It should not check the other boxes. So we see this a lot, for example, where if you look at like some of these parents on social media, they're usually moms. Maybe that's a little bit unfair to say, but who live vicariously, dads do this too, who live vicariously through their children. So I failed in my duty becoming a successful singer. I failed in my duty becoming a professional athlete. This is a desire that I had. And now, since I failed in my duty, I'm going to fulfill it vicariously through my child. No, you're going to go to baseball camp every single day. Every summer you're going to go. Every winter you're going to go. We're going to do this. 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 This is fulfilling a dharma through a relationship. It's wrong. And it causes so many problems. Fulfilling your artha through a relationship is also wrong. Getting wealth through a relationship is wrong. Right? If it's a part of like a broader agreement, that's totally fine. I'm not saying that every partner has to work, but generally speaking, using it as a substitute for your own sort of financial independence insecurity is incorrect. But then the third thing that they realized is even if you check those two boxes, that is insufficient for happiness. And what you need is a relationship to be happy. That's like what we're wired for. Right? And this is like, it's so big in our wiring that we go through a process called puberty, where like our brains change and literally our bodies and brains change to help us engage in relationships. And then the fourth branch is spirituality. So after you've checked all those 3 boxes, you may still be unhappy in life. And that's when spirituality enters the picture. So this is where if you want to be happy, you've got to do all 4. And this is where like when people come to me and say, Dr. K, I'm unhappy. They call me Dr. Kanoja because there's like patients, for example. But I don't say to them, okay, like, oh, you're unhappy, like start meditating more. That's not actually what I say to them. You're unhappy, like find a relationship. You're unhappy, don't look for a relationship. This is where the secret to your happiness, there is not like there's sort of a formula, but what will make you happy depends on you. So for some people who come to me and they're like, yeah, I have no purpose in life. I don't tell them to go out and get laid. I tell them, let's figure out your purpose. And then there are some people who have figured out their purpose. They enjoy their job. It's fulfilling. They're rewarded. They have money, but they're lonely. And so then we work on relationships. By all means, let's find you a relationship. What gets in the way? What is it like being alone? What do you dislike about being alone? What is it like being with other people? And then sometimes I get people who are a little bit late career. And we work on this in like career coaching, for example. So this is what we call stage 4 people in career coaching. Where these are the people who have checked all the boxes. They actually have families, they have money, they're successful, but they're still unhappy. So how do you help those people? That's when spirituality enters the picture. And the reason that the advice is bad is because everyone assumes that there's one answer for all 4 steps. So there are people out there who will tell you, oh, if you are unhappy in a relationship, these are just thoughts in your mind and you need to learn detachment and let go of that thought and forget your stupid detachment to wanting loved and feeling unloved and all that crap. You can work your way to enlightenment, and you'll see those people at ashrams, right? Oh yeah, man, like, why are you so attached to like love, bruh? Like, I'm living the present moment. That means I sleep with whoever I want to when I want to. Like, why are you so like trying to shackle me? And that $50 you owed me, like, why are you so materialistic? Like, bruh, it's just money. Like, be detached, bruh. Why are you riding me like this? Like, be more spiritual. These are the spiritual leeches who will use spirituality as a substitute for the other things. And I did that, by the way. I failed at artha, failed at dharma too, where I was unsuccessful. So what did I do? I said, haha, these idiots in the world are so materialistic. I'm going to rise above it. And I'm going to become so spiritual that I will conquer my material desires. And thankfully, I found a good teacher, a good guru, who slapped me upside the head and is like, bitch, you don't get to run away from the world. I tried to give up my life. I said, I want to give up my life and I want to become a monk. And he was like, he didn't use the word bitch, but he's like, bitch, you have nothing to give up. You have nothing worth sacrificing. You're not sacrificing anything for spirituality. You've got nothing, bro. So he told me, go back, get a doctoral degree, become successful in the world, then come back when you're 30 and give all that crap up. Then we'll take you. So it's not just using a relationship to fulfill the other things, it's using any of these things to fulfill other things. And we see this as well in terms of like artha, right? People who feel unloved will surround themselves with material possessions. So I'm going to use my wealth as a substitute for being loved and loving other people in turn. I will let go of spirituality completely and just buy fancier watches and fancier cars and be more bling and more bling and more bling. None of it works. You have to do all 4, and you can't use anything to substitute for anything else. So if you are unhappy because something is missing in your life, chase that thing. And you got to be super careful about listening to people who say you don't need, that's not the secret. The secret is you have to be happy by yourself. The people who believe that are the ones who are using relationships as a substitute, right? That was their experience because they were using their relationship as a proxy for their own self-worth. And so that becomes true for them, but it may not be true for you. The key thing is not to substitute anything for anything else. And it's a lot of work. I swear to God, it's more work than you think it is because you got to do everything. You got to have a purpose in life. You got to get paid. You got to have pleasure, and you got to be spiritual. But it's cool because like once you start doing any of these things and you really focus on them, like everything else, it just like kind of works. Like it's hard to describe. They just like follow each other. And even that, like I've worked with some people who, so let's look at like my success, for example. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. Here's the secrets. But some time ago, I was like, my dharma, my duty, my purpose is to help other human beings. And I walked away from 2 really good job offers and a very lucrative private practice. And like, I'm okay with that. Like I've done okay. I'm not complaining. Right? I wanted to be a monk. I was going to sacrifice my family. I didn't have a family. I was like, I'm going to give it all up. And I ended up getting married. Like that worked out okay. I'm still living a spiritual life. I'm grateful. I have a wonderful wife. I've got 2 kids. Luckiest man on the planet. And it works. Like it works. So fix the problems that you have in your life. And if someone's telling you like you don't need a relationship to be happy, but if the source of your unhappiness is a lack of love in your life, then by all means find a relationship. But don't expect that relationship to be a substitute for feelings of things like low self-worth or like lack of money or like anything else, or even spirituality. Make sense? Questions? Okay, this is an interesting question. Calic Fox is saying, how do asexual people factor into Kam or atheists to moksha? Very easily. So first of all, kam means desire, to fulfill your like worldly desires. So sex is just one of those. You can be like, you don't have to have sex. It also means like you should enjoy, taking a swim in the ocean. You should enjoy, listening to good music and driving down through a scenic highway. It means you should enjoy a delicious, I don't know, like piece of cake. To satisfy kam, it doesn't have to be sex. That's just one of the pieces of kam. And if that's not a piece for you, totally fine. You don't have to satisfy that desire that way. And now what does atheism have to do with moksha? Like most of the people who pursue, well, I don't know about most, but I mean, belief in God is one of the paths to moksha, which is enlightenment. So it's like one of the 4 paths to enlightenment. Like you don't have to believe in God. It's a pretty good path. It works for a lot of people, but it's not the only way. And that's why they say it's like, the word that they use is moksha, which is enlightenment. It's not bhakti, which is like faith or devotion in God. Those are 2 completely separate words. So DJ Runke is saying, what if we don't resonate with anything spirituality? That's totally fine. So this is the other thing, is they're ordered. Right? So there are some people who will go straight to spirituality. These are people who are monks. But they're ordered. And that's why, like, when someone comes to my office and is like, I'm alone, I want love in my life, and I want someone to love. And by the way, what devastates more people than a lack of someone to love them is honestly a lack of someone for them to love. They have all this love, and they have nowhere to put it. And so they get into all kinds of problems by falling into love way too much because they have this beautiful thing that they want someone to have. There's no one to have it. And so they come in sequence. That's kind of what I'm saying. It's like when that person comes into my office, I'm not like, you need to detach from life. Let go of the love. No, it's like, bro, if you want a girl, if you want love in your life, like, let's help you find love. What gets in the way? How do you feel about yourself? How do you behave on dates? Does that lack of self-worth shine through? How can you like put yourself out there in sort of the positive way? Like, you don't have to do spirituality if you don't want to. Europentia is saying, how do you know what amount is just right and how much is too much? I don't know what you're referring to, but I'd say that the answer is generally practice. How do you know if the spice level in the food is too much or if it's just right? You make it a few times. You learn from your mistakes. Can you do the 4 things in any order? You can, but generally speaking, they're easiest done, I think, in that order. So first, like, do your basic stuff, like fulfill your basic duties, then focus on the accumulation of wealth, then focus on satisfying your desires. And then once you've satisfied your desires, then you can give it all up. Do the Shastras and Sutras you mentioned have English translations? Absolutely. 100%. Kam Sutra is everyone's favorite. Everyone loves to translate the Kam Sutra. And the Arthashastra, there's like, people study that stuff in business schools. They're like textbooks written about it. The order is purpose, duty, right? So what does that mean practically? That means like, if you're 14 years old or 16 years old and you're in school, your basic duty is to try to do a good job in school. This is the learning phase of your life. Right? And then like later on, if you're like a little bit more financially independent and you're like working, like your duty is to become secure in your wealth, to be able to be independent and have fun and stuff like that, right? Go on vacation. And then you should enjoy the fruits of your labor. That's step 3. You've worked really hard, you deserve it, right? So have, some beverage with a little umbrella on it on the beach because you worked hard and you studied hard. And you like did some good in the world. So like you get to relax some or get yourself like, whatever that new game is and like set up your Steam Deck or your Switch or whatever on your like 4K resolution TV and like have some fun. And then if you do that for a while, you'll eventually realize like, oh, this is like somewhat empty. Like this isn't really bringing me fulfillment. And even though I play this game and I play this game and I play this game, all 3 of those games were fun. But at some point, like, I realized that no amount of games will ever make me truly happy. And that when I finish one game, I just want the next one. And so it feels like I'm on a treadmill where I'm like walking, I'm chasing something, but I'm never content. That's when you need spirituality. So can you ever become a monk without having to build up the life? Absolutely. That's what most monks do. They skip steps 1, 2, and 3. Maybe they don't skip step 1, but they'll skip step 2 or 3. Right? And there are people who won't do all of them. I've also worked with people who are very successful at Artha, and they've been divorced 3 times. Right? Estranged from their children. Okay. Yeah, I see there's tons of questions about spirituality. So let me think about that. Okay, so here's how I would define spirituality. So a lot of people would say something like spirituality is like a connection to something greater than yourself. But when I used to hear that crap, I guess it's not crap, but when I used to hear it, my instinctive reaction was like, how do you know there's something greater than yourself? Like, what are you even talking about? Right? Like, there's no proof that there's God, or maybe some people believe there's proof, whatever. It's like a thing that like all human beings are like connected. Like we're all connected, and that's what spirituality is. Okay? And then that too, I was kind of like, well, no, that's not spirituality. That's like psychology. Like we've evolved that way. There's genetics, there's bonding, there's procreation, there's advancement of the species. So I'll tell y'all what spirituality, what I really understood what spirituality means, which I don't know it's something that I can explain or not. So I'm going to do my best. So we have a body, we've got genetics, we've got sexual drives, we have all this kind of stuff, right? And then we have this thing called our mind, which is like our emotions, our desires, our ambitions. But if you really pay attention to yourself, there is something besides those two things. So if we look at like experience cannot be captured precisely by the mind or by the body. And you may say, yes, it can be captured by the mind, but I would beg to differ. And I think that's where you really have to practice and understand. And maybe you'll come to a different conclusion. So for example, like we know what the gustatory cortex is of the brain. We know what the gustatory association cortex is. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but there's something there that has gustatory associations. And so like we know how neurons work. We know where taste buds are. I can be an expert neuroscientist, understand all the studies, look at all of the fMRIs, and understand exactly what happens when someone takes a bite of a strawberry. These particular receptors activate. The receptors towards the back of your tongue, because that's where the sour receptors are. The bitter receptors are elsewhere. If it's a sweeter strawberry, this one will activate. It'll travel up to our gustatory cortex. That'll then go to our memory association cortex and will remind me of particular things. It'll trigger particular memories. I can understand all that stuff. But all that stuff will never tell me what the taste of a strawberry is. I will never know what the taste of a strawberry is. You read as much as you want. You're never going to know, right? You can watch as much pornography as you want to. It doesn't make you good at sex. Nor does it get you laid. There is a gap that cannot be fulfilled without experience. So then the next question becomes, okay, well, what about the mind? The mind is where experience is. And that's where it's hard to describe, but once you meditate, you will transcend mind. So there is awareness. So if we think about what is mind is thoughts and emotions, generally, right? Even things like memories and whatnot. Like these are the functions of mind. It has thoughts and emotions, memories, whatever. But we can experience things outside of thoughts and emotions. So this is what we call like a flow state, which is like the first step of a transcendent state. And there are even higher states that, for example, like psychedelics can kind of shortcut us to that sort of area. And does that have a mental correlate? Does it have a brain correlate? Yes. But there's something, this is what I discovered through spiritual practices. is that a human being cannot be reduced to body and mind. There's some third variable there. And the exploration of that third variable is what spirituality is. Does that make sense? It's just that there's a third bucket. That's the simplest thing. And the pursuit of that third bucket is what we would call spirituality. That's how I would define it. Yeah, so some people will call it consciousness, some people will call it soul, some people will call it God. But if you think about what do all three of those things share, which is kind of weird, right? Because spirituality, soul, and God, like, yeah, they're all kind of spiritual, but what are they referring to? They're referring to that which is outside the first two buckets. So I would almost define spirituality as like, it's like a negative definition. It is that which is not physical and that which is not mental is spiritual. Right? So this is, if you guys want to like be spiritual or not be, but explore spirituality, just look at that basic thing. This is the most fundamental exploration of spirituality, which I don't know like how we got up into all this religion and this psychedelic crap. Just like look at your own self. And like, even if you understand this, I'll give you all an example. When we listen to sad music, we can feel good. Like, what's going on there? It's weird because the emotion we're experiencing is sadness. So how can sadness feel good? And this is what the people who like studied spirituality figured out is, holy crap, there's actually like a mechanism there where the more detached from something I am, the more peace I can feel, and even negative emotions can feel good. Right? We think there's negative emotions and positive emotions. Like we think like, oh yeah, like anger's bad. Like, do y'all know how satisfying it feels to be pissed at someone in a video game and absolutely crush them? Feels so good. Right? Maybe we're getting into ego and stuff there too. But emotions, negative emotions can feel good. Grief can feel cathartic. Sadness can help us feel connected to other people. So there's something that there's just more to a human being than your thoughts and your body. And here's like kind of a simple, like, this is sort of like a yogic argument, but if we ask you, so here's a simple way to connect with your spirituality. It's hard, but it's simple. So who are you? I'm me. What defines you? Well, so I'm Alok. I'm a doctor. I've got black hair. I'm 40 years old. And right now I'm feeling this way. So if you look at your experience of life, which of those is constant? Was I Alok before I was a doctor? Yes. Was I Alok before I was 5'8" or however tall I am? Yes. Was I Alok before I was married, before I was a father? Yes. Was I Alok when I was like 2 feet tall? Absolutely. So I'm happy right now, but I was sad before. So is that a part of who I am? Like those all fluctuate. So if you look at your body changes over time. Your mind changes even more rapidly than your body. You're sad one minute, you're happy the next minute. But there is some degree of constancy to who you are. You've always been you. You've always been you. There are good times and there are bad times. There are short times and there are tall times. There are sick times and there are healthy times, but you've always been you. So then the question is, hold on a second, but if the body is different, how can that be the same thing? It's not the same thing, obviously, right? One body is 2 feet tall and one body is 5 feet tall. How can that be the same thing? Not the same thing. Sadness is different from happiness. How can that be the same thing? It's not the same thing. They're opposites. So what is it that you are? Spirituality is the search for that third bucket. It's the acknowledgement that, hold on, physical stuff is temporary. Mental stuff is temporary, but there is some degree of constancy that you are. And this is why people meditate, to explore spirituality, because what is meditation looking for? Meditation is looking for the constancy outside of physical form and mind. And I don't mean that as like that sounds like, I hate the way that sounds. It sounds like some friggin' BS, like spirituality retreat. I'm not saying like look for the constancy outside of your mind and body, and that's how you discover who you are. No, but that's like literally your mind fluctuates, your body changes, but there is a part of you that is the same. And so when we practice these like things like meditation, we are trying to remove all of the variables. It's almost like a randomized controlled trial for yourself. We're trying to control for all the physical variables. That's why we're vegetarian, and that's why we do yoga. To eliminate we control for the physical variables. And then we train our mind and we control for sadness and happiness and whatever. And what's left? That's what spirituality is. Isn't the only constancy the fact of change? No. The only place that change is constant is in the body, in the mind, in society, in the external world. But the you-ness of you has never changed. Do you get that? You've always been you. If you think about the person who experienced being bullied, who experienced that birthday, who experienced getting those presents, who experienced winning a game, who experienced losing a game, that person, the experiencer, has always been the same. It's only the experience that changes. The subject is the same. It's the object of experience that fluctuates. Because you felt all of those things. The feeler is the same. The feeling changes. This is when Ellen Kakarolina is saying, but isn't me just an illusion? So close your eyes. We'll do a meditation. So close your eyes. What part of you is an illusion? Really, like notice. What's illusory? This is the kind of thing where if I was like teaching this on a stage, I'd ask for a volunteer. I'd ask them to close their eyes and I'd flick their nose. And then I'd ask them, is that an illusion? Right? So then this is like, oh, like, so like, you just like, isn't me an illusion? Yeah, I agree that. So the identity is an illusion. Right? But you are not, like, you're there. You're not like fake. You're not fake. Your words can be fake. Your feelings can be confused. Your identity can be fake, but you are not fake. There's like some part of you that's absolutely there, right? This is what Descartes figured out. Cogito ergo sum. And he was like, at the end of the day, even if I can't trust what I believe or what I think, there's at least something there that exists. So many good questions. All right, but people wanted to talk about perfectionism and procrastination, so we have to honor that as well. Okay, Dr. K's Guide to Philosophy. No, don't do Dr. K's Guide to Philosophy. Do Dr. K's Guide to Meditation. That's why we have the guide. So we explain some of the philosophical stuff, but this is the kind of thing where you can read about it as much as you want, right? Just like pornography or watching like cooking shows. You can watch all these like competitive cooking shows. Doesn't mean I'm going to order my pizza and I'm going to sit there and eat like pizza and Coke or whatever, or Mountain Dew or whatever in my degenerate days. And I'm going to watch all these people eat all this fancy food. We can talk about philosophy as long as y'all want to. But if you actually want to understand this stuff, check out the Guide to Meditation. We'll explain all of it to you. What are the different paths? What are the different ways to meditate? I've seen so many questions people are asking. How do I know if I'm meditating right? The answer is in there. What kind of meditation should I do? The answer is in there. What is this whole deal with like meditation in the self? What are we talking about? There's something about. What about meditation for improving performance? We've got that in there too. The reason we built the guide is because if I didn't build the guide, I'd answer the same damn questions over and over and over and over and over again. That's the only thing I'd ever answer. Those are the most important questions. And I still do. Sarenzor's right, because I acknowledge that that's why we built it. But first of all, not everyone can afford it. Not everyone, people, you all have questions now, and it's okay to answer questions again. Who am I to think that my boringness from answering a question is more important than your curiosity or you learning, right? What's important? The important thing is that you learn. Aurelion Swole is saying, don't usually catch a stream, but I love your videos. Thanks very much for coming. Appreciate you liking the videos. That's why we make them. People are asking about like my philosophy. This question is beyond me, Merkin. Don't you think your philosophy of spirituality basically tries to say we have answers to things we just don't have an answer to yet? I don't think so, but if that's what my philosophy says and you know more about philosophy than I do, then sure. Oh, are there any meditations I can do with deviated septum? Absolutely. All kinds of meditations. I'd steer clear of especially one nostril breath meditations, but you can do all kinds of other meditations. There's sight meditation, sound meditations. You can do Trataka, Anahat Chakra, sound meditation, all that kind of stuff. So Teus flips, how do you schedule meditation into a very busy schedule, Dr. K? What a good question. Okay, I'm going to answer this question, then we're going to move on to perfectionism and procrastination. How do you meditate if you're busy? So first thing to understand, I think this is the Dalai Lama. Had a really famous quote. Dalai Lama said, you should meditate for half an hour every day. If you don't have the time, you should meditate for an hour. So if we really look at our lives, we're not as busy as we think we are. We feel busy, but we've actually got a lot of time. You can find half an hour, right? You're sitting here on Twitch or YouTube or whatever. You can find half an hour. You also don't need to meditate for half an hour. So how do I meditate with a very busy schedule? The meditation doesn't come out of the schedule. It comes out of like the non-scheduled stuff, if that kind of makes sense, right? So I have like work and then I got to go pick up my kids and I got to take them to this class and I got to take them to that class and I got to cook dinner and I got to pick up groceries. You don't have to meditate during those times. I meditate in the times outside. The other thing that you can do is make it a part of your day. So that's something that I do. So for example, I used to meditate for like 2 hours a day. How do you meditate for 2 hours a day, Dr. K, especially if you're a full-time working clinician? I meditate with my patients. That's pretty cool. Now I don't see a whole lot of patients. So what do? I meditate with my kids before I put them to bed. It's part of my parenting. So here's the thing to understand about meditation. Meditation isn't a formal practice. It is a state of mind when you engage with other things. So you can meditate while you eat. You can meditate even while you're playing a video game. That's harder. You can meditate while you're taking a walk. You can meditate while you're taking a dump. It is a state of mind. It is not an action. So practically, what do? I incorporate it into things throughout my day. So sometimes when I go for a walk, I will sit down on a park bench and I will simply close my eyes for like 5 minutes and I'll meditate. Or as I'm walking around my house, I will recite my mantra in my head. The recent one has been I meditate with my kids. And something cool happened is I didn't ask them to meditate with me. I would go, I'm like putting them to sleep. And I'll tell them, hey, daddy's going to meditate for a few minutes, then I'll finish putting you to sleep. I'd sit down, sit in an Ardha Padmasana, half lotus posture, I'd start to meditate. One of the kids falls asleep, totally cool. The other one's like, I want to meditate too. And she sits with me, we meditate for a few minutes, and then she goes to bed. So if you're super busy, I would say incorporate it into your day. And the way you incorporate it into your day is by doing the task that you are doing with full awareness. So even if you're eating, don't distract your mind while you are eating. So if you take a bite of food, take it with full awareness. So taste every single thing. Feel every single thing about the food. The smell of the food, the taste of the food, the textures of the food. How does the food feel against the roof of your mouth? How does it feel against your tongue? How does it feel against your teeth? How do different foods of different textures feel in different parts of your mouth? If you take a bite of a salad that has been mixed together, how many ingredients can you detect in the bite of salad? You can make it a part of any part of your day. So Big Bird Chris is saying, but I want to watch TV. That can be a meditation too. You see, what do you mean, Dr. K? Watching TV can be meditation. Not watching TV, although that could. Wanting to watch TV. Close your eyes for a moment. Where does the desire to want to watch TV come from? Where do you experience the wanting? To be entertained is not an experience. That's a goal. You think about this for a second. How do you know that you want to watch TV? Do you guys get that? That's a signal that is entering your experience in some way. What is the actual signal? Imagine I'm an alien. How would you explain to me and say, how do you know you want to watch TV? And then someone says dopamine. What does that feel like? Dopamine it's a word. It's a neurotransmitter. It's not an experience. Curiosity. What is that? How do you know if you're curious? A sense of hunger. Where? Where is that hunger coming from? See, like anything can be a meditation. Get to the root of why you want to watch TV. And I don't mean like psychologically. I mean like what is the actual signal that you are receiving that you then translate into a goal, into a desire, into something else? Because there's an actual signal in there. How do you get to the root? You look for it. I can't get there for you. I can just show you what direction to go, but you've got to walk the path. It's like an itch deep inside my brain. So it's like an itch. We're getting closer. What is the itch? What is an itch? So an itch is a physical sensation when it's on the body, right? But what is an itch in the mind? And now we struggle with, oh my God, how do I get more motivated? How do I stop watching so much TV? And yet we don't even understand what wanting to watch TV is. We don't even understand what motivation is. What is motivation? It's the desire to do something. How do you know if you want to do something? What does it feel like? How do you know if you don't want to do something? What does that feel like? We're sitting there trying to build castles, and we don't even know what a brick looks like. And we wonder why it's so hard to get motivated. Geronimo 2521 is saying, if we meditate about wanting to watch TV, will that decrease our desire to watch TV? How the fuck am I supposed to know? You tell me. So if I say, yeah, it'll do that, and then you try, what's going to happen? Is it going to work? What difference does it make what my answer is? Figure it out for yourself. Notice what happens to your desire. Then you'll control it. You will master every desire that you have if you just pay attention. Understand how the bricks work. Understand how the Legos work. What do I gain from doing all this stuff? What I gain, what I was really looking for, is understanding. There are all kinds of material benefits. I became more professionally successful. I became more focused. I became more motivated. I became more empathic. My relationships improved. I suffered less on a day-to-day. I was happier. I was more content. And none of those are reasons why I wanted to do it. And none of those are really reasons why I continue to want to do it. I want to understand. I want to figure out what the hell is this thing called life? I want to know, I want to see the rule book and understand the mechanics to this thing that we call life. That's why I do it. What are your thoughts on the Dalai Lama? I don't really have many thoughts on the Dalai Lama. I think it's a time-honored tradition. That's another thing that I'm curious about. How do you pick the new Dalai Lama? What do you detect? What's the actual signal that you're seeing? I'd love to learn more. Okay. Let's do, yeah, thanks, Tech Teller. Okay, so last thing, okay? But I'm loving hanging out with y'all. I appreciate y'all being here, chat. Perfectionism and procrastination are ruining my life. I'm at my wit's end with my perfectionism. It's taken over my life and is causing me to procrastinate on every creative project I've ever wanted to pursue. The arts, music, animation, writing, video games, etc. I have so many ideas and passions, but I can never seem to follow through with them because I'm too afraid of not being able to execute them perfectly. I also have a hard time learning new things quickly and effectively. I put so much pressure on myself to understand everything immediately. This has made it difficult for me to progress in my personal and professional life. I constantly feel like I'm not good enough. It's not just affecting my hobbies, it's affecting my work and personal relationships too. I'm constantly self-guessing myself and feeling like a failure because I'm not meeting my own impossibly high standards. I'm struggling to find joy in anything anymore, and it's all because of my crippling perfectionism. Every task feels like a defeat, and if anything isn't perfect, it's like I'm failing at everything. I put every task on the back burner, procrastinating on everything I need to do because I'm too afraid of not being able to execute it perfectly. I feel like I'm stuck in a cycle of perfectionism and procrastination. I don't know how to break free. I don't know where to begin, and what's worse, I don't know what to do if it doesn't work out. Have any of you experienced this level of perfectionism before? How did you overcome it? Are there any strategies or techniques that have worked for you? I'm willing to try anything at this point. So, the first thing that I'm going to say is someone says, I'm willing to try anything. And this is why I'm going to start by pushing back a little bit. Are you willing to try anything? Or are you only willing to try things that work? So if we look at this, what's the first thing to understand? The first thing to understand is that when someone says, I'm willing to try anything, we're not actually willing to try anything. That's crazy. I only want to try things that work. But let's understand perfectionism and procrastination, okay? So this person is brilliant, insightful, articulate. Love it. So let's understand a couple of things. The first is that the procrastination is a symptom of the root of perfectionism, right? So why is it hard for them to get started? They even laid this out. So how are perfectionism and procrastination linked? So if I want to be perfect, I can't get started until I know it'll be perfect. And so we can't get started because we're setting an impossible standard for ourselves because we need to be perfect. I need a plan that will achieve perfection. And I'm going to figure out the perfect plan before I get started because what's the point in starting without a perfect plan? Because then I'll do all this work and it won't be perfect and that won't be good enough. So why even bother getting started in the first place? So the procrastination comes out of the desire for perfection. So if you want to disable the procrastination, you need to do one of two things. Either let go of the perfectionism entirely and be okay starting without being perfect, which there's a path to. We've done a video about, we've done multiple videos about how to overcome procrastination. There's something in the ADHD guide, a guide to doing stuff, by the way. But let's understand that procrastination, if your goal is perfection, you can't get started until you have a plan that is perfect. And does such a plan exist? No. So since there's no such thing as a perfect plan, because as a human being, you can't predict the future, it's impossible to get started. So why do we say that this procrastinates? Does this person never do anything? No, they do stuff, but it's really hard for them to get started. And that's because something else has to overcome their need for procrastination, desperation, last minute panic. It's due tomorrow. Someone else is mad at me. And so experiencing life as this person is awful. It's like you're a ping pong ball and you're getting swatted back and forth between perfectionism and what other negative emotion is required to overcome the procrastination related to the perfectionism. So you have no control over your life. You're being like swatted around by negative emotions. And when you're getting swatted around by negative emotions and you have no control, your performance suffers. You certainly ain't behaving perfect, let alone good. So how do we tackle this? So let's understand the desire for perfectionism. So we want to be perfect for a couple of reasons. The first is sometimes our performance correlates with our value as a human being. So if you look at like a lot of people grow up in situations where they're taught, you're not a good child. You're not a bad child. Oddly enough, people who are taught that they're good children or bad children, this doesn't apply to them. There are some of us who are taught that whether we are good children or bad children depends. So in a very traumatic situation, abusive situation, these people are not perfectionists. They don't struggle with perfectionism because they're like, I suck to begin with. I'm going to suck no matter what. Their problem is different. And then there are people who are sort of brought up in a secure environment where like, you're a good kid and it's okay to fail and like, that's not us. Then there are those of us who are perfectionistic. And what happens with the perfectionistic people? Whether I'm a good or a bad person depends on my performance. It depends. And once we fall into that, then we're in big trouble because our value as a human being and we want to make people happy, right? We want to make people happy. We want to be a good person. These are important ideals. These are good things to want. It's important to make other people happy. It's important to feel good about ourselves. Like self-esteem is important. The problem is that depending on your wiring, you started equating performance with value as a human being. And so what do we want? I want high self-esteem. I want to be a great human being. Of course, who doesn't want to be a great human being? How do I become a great human being? Great human being equals perfect performance. So when do you see this? You see this in people whose value was dependent on their accomplishments. That's one reason why people are perfectionistic. Second reason why people are perfectionistic is they cannot tolerate the consequences of a non-perfect solution. So if I'm not perfect, that means that stuff can happen, okay? And that stuff, when that stuff happens that is not perfect, there is a response within me that is too painful to deal with. So I'll give you all an example. I like someone. I want to ask them out on a date. But them saying no hurts so much. I'm rejected. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be a POS. I want to be a Chad. I don't want to be a whatever the opposite of a Chad is. And that rejection, I've learned to fear that rejection because I've been rejected or whatever in the past. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with a perfect strategy, because if I can come up with the perfect strategy, I can control the result. And if I can control the result, then I don't need to suffer. So the desire for perfection is a protection against the consequences of a suboptimal result. If I get a B and someone else gets an A, they're going to get an award. Everyone's going to cheer and clap, and I'm going to feel jealous. I hate feeling jealous. I hate feeling second best. I don't want to feel second best. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be perfect, and then I'm going to be number one, and then everyone's going to clap for me. And I'm going to feel so good. I hate that feeling of envy. I hate that feeling of jealousy, especially because I know that person deserved it, and I don't deserve it, which makes it hurt even worse. So we desire perfection to protect ourselves from the consequences of a lack of perfection. Reason number 2. Let me think. Is there number 3? Can't think of anything in the moment. So it usually has to do with intolerance of negative emotion. It has to do with our sense of ego or value. So then how do we tackle these two things? So let's start with the second one. So if we think about procrastination, I can't get started until I know I'm going to be perfect. And if I'm perfect, then everyone's going to cheer for me. Everyone's going to clap for me. I'm going to feel good and I don't want to feel bad. And so if we think about literally what this will feel like for you is when you think about getting started, there will be an anticipation of a particular feeling. So what the procrastination will look like is if I get started now, and you can pay attention to yourself, okay? What this looks like is if I get started now, your mind will warn you of a particular consequence. You'll start to feel fear or jealousy or inferiority or something like that. And that's how you know that that's what's going on. Even the thought of getting started evokes that emotion. And then that emotion is something you're so terrified from, you run away from it, so you don't get started. You procrastinate. Okay? Now, the other thing, so how do you tell the difference? The other thing is that if you're trying to get started and you think about other people, and this can be tricky because this can evoke an emotion as well, but this person will think this about me. And this person will think this about me. And if I do it this way, they will think this about me. If I do this, they will love me. And if what you're chasing is something from someone else, that's that other kind of perfectionism. Because it's about ego. It's about wanting to be seen a particular way. Now the question becomes, okay, so what do we do about it? And that's where each of these things is like monumental tasks on its own. So now I'm left with the task of trying to figure out how to help y'all with it. So let's start with the emotions. So the first thing is when you feel that procrastination coming on, you will respond to it. You'll either quit the task and beat yourself up, or you'll complete the task and kind of beat yourself up and push through it. Does that kind of make sense? I think about, okay, I need to start studying today. And then I step away and then I start thinking about how I didn't study today. I need to study, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to beat myself up. But the interesting thing is once you start that cycle, you're no longer thinking about studying. You're beating yourself up for not studying. So you've actually stepped away from the task. Or when that beating yourself up is strong enough, you push yourself through and you start engaging in the task. But you're not sitting in that middle zone, if that makes sense. You've pushed through the procrastination or you've run away from the procrastination. And now the problem has become you haven't really conquered the procrastination. You've let your guilt, despair, or frustration overcome it, which means now you are becoming dependent on the frustration, fear, or guilt to overcome the procrastination. Then you're screwed. Because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So what we need to do is just sit with procrastination. Just sit there in that moment. It's not about beating yourself up. Today I need to do some studying. I'm going to try to study right now. Don't force yourself into it. Notice the frustration. Just sit there and don't do your work. Sit with the procrastination. Don't start it. Don't run away from it. Don't beat yourself up. You'll notice those things and move away from when you start beating yourself up. No, I should just start it. No. We're just going to sit there. Set a timer for 5 minutes. We are not going to start studying for 5 minutes. Just going to sit and do nothing. So how do we stop playing ping pong? Stop hitting the ball. You're tired of getting knocked around? Just sit. And this is where your mind will start to rebel. It'll say, but if I just sit, I'll never get anything done. And all those kinds of things. And there it is again with the stick. What is the ping pong paddle? Pop. Nope. It's just 5 minutes. We're gonna do anything. No, you need to do stuff. You need to do stuff. Nope. We're just gonna chill. 5 minutes. Breathe. You can do meditation if you want to. You got to be careful because if you start meditating to start working, that's another ping pong paddle. You need to meditate more. If you meditated better, you'd be able to work. Nope, we're just going to sit. 5 minutes, set a timer. Just feel the tolerance. And this is where you say, but it's not working. I'm not being productive. Yes, you are. What you are doing for those 5 minutes is tolerating the emotion and not letting it control you. You are literally training yourself to be resistant to the swat of the ping pong paddle. Your ball is becoming heavier. It's no longer a ping pong ball. It's becoming stone, lead, some kind of super dense alloy. And if you rise to the level of Buddha, you're going to be like a supernova or a black hole, infinite density, and nothing will be able to touch you. Just tolerate. Don't do a damn thing and don't react to any of your emotions either way. Do y'all get that? Sit. Now, what if you have the other one? What if people think this and think that about you? This is where it's kind of tricky, but what you've got to do is recognize there's two different things here. One is the task that you need to do, and one is how people will respond to the task. Which one do you really want? Because as long as the two are tangled together, you're SOL. Y'all get that? Like you're like trying to fight a war on two fronts. You can't make people happy and do work. You can either do work, you can't even really ever make people happy. All you can do is do the work. So acknowledge that in this work, you are adding another victory condition. It's like we're playing this game and now there's this second victory condition. And it's like, holy crap, that makes winning the game way harder. And what are we actually trying to do? We're trying to stop procrastinating. So what we're trying to do is get started. But when we layer in that second victory condition of this needs to be perfect so that people will love me, like that's really hard because you can't get people to love you. And now it's like I'm playing an RTS game, or let's say I'm playing an FPS game. And the victory condition is like something that doesn't exist in the game. It's like there's one victory condition, which is score like 15 points by hitting 15 bullseyes. And the second victory condition is get elected as president of the United States. You're like, that's not even in the game. That's what we're doing. Like if you're trying to like study and your mind is adding this thing of if you don't get an A, your parents won't love you. Like, how are you even supposed to study? Like, there's nothing in the textbook about making your parents love you. That's something you're layering on top. So separate those two things. It's the only shot you've got is to separate those two things. And even then, it'll be a challenge. It's not easy to separate them, but then sort of ask yourself in that moment, can I at least get started on the work? And I'll worry about making other people, I know I want to make them happy. I can worry about that later. So as best as you can, procrastinate on making other people happy. And just get started with the work. Can I just do this for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? And if it's not good, I'll solve that problem. Talk to the part of your mind that's like, oh, it's not going to be enough. And it's like, okay, fine. But it'll be a start. We always quit later. But let's get started. And this kind of cognitive reframe, this cognitive flexibility can be really hard to do. And it's not going to work the first time you do it. But if you keep trying, you'll start to get some traction. Right? It's kind of like learning how to do a push-up. If you've never done a push-up before, you can't even do a single push-up. So even if you're like thinking about pull-ups, like if you can't do a single pull-up and failure is inevitable, how do you learn how to do one pull-up? You jump up, you grab the bar, and then you train yourself on the descent, right? You let the rate of dropping slow down. And that'll strengthen the muscles, and then eventually you'll be able to do one pull-up. So oddly enough, trying to separate it, even if it doesn't work, is still strengthening those muscles. And the real way to overcome this, whether you're becoming, a ping pong ball to a black hole or separating these things out, it's a painful process of repeated failures. And the beautiful thing is once you start engaging with that, something will shift in your mind. It's okay to fail. And now the pendulum is swung far, far, far away from perfectionism. And then shit becomes easy. Not gonna lie. Good luck. Questions? So there's So basically eliminating the cognitive load of the task so you could increase the chance of doing the task. That is absolutely one ultra mega point. That is one of the factors at play. So we talk about this in the ADHD guide, how to reduce cognitive load. So there are studies that show that if you have ADHD and you have a messy room, your brain is constantly filtering out all of the mess so that you can focus on like reading a book. But it's actually getting all of that stimuli and it's increasing the cognitive load. There are studies that actually show that cleaning your room literally makes cognitive tasks easier to accomplish. So there's absolutely a portion of that. Amanzour is saying, what if you have perfectionism both ways? What do you think, Amanzour? What a great question. Can perfectionism come from self-pressure? Yeah. So I think the third thing is that this is other people as well, but so I think the third aspect is that sometimes perfectionism can come from the ego, our desire to be something. I want to be something. And the thing that I want to be is perfect, because then I'll feel good about myself if I can be a perfect version of myself. And so that's absolutely a piece of it. We must do it based on both? Nope. You don't have to do it based on both. Close. You just have to do one of them. You notice? Then what does your mind say? But if I just do one of them, it won't work. So you have to do it perfectly. If you've got both problems, you got to do it perfectly. Got to address them both. Can't do it halfway. Learn to do shit halfway. Honestly, like, biggest success story of my life is learning how to do things half-assed. I tried to full-ass everything, and then it's like too much. You just don't have that much ass. You got to start half-assing it. Got to conserve that ass. You know what I'm saying? You can sit there and do either one. The point is, just get started. You don't have to do them both at once. Which one should you do? Whichever one you feel like, whichever one feels easier, whichever one is easier to start with. Is the compulsion for perfectionism a learned response? No. No, actually. So there are some very hardwired aspects of perfectionism. So if you look at like so kids learn how to walk, right? Most kids learn how to walk. And if you think about the process of learning how to walk is filled with failure. Like we fail like over and over and over and over and over again. Why don't kids give up? Despite the fact that they like literally can't walk. They don't know how to walk. And they just keep trying, they keep trying, they keep trying. They don't even know how to pick things up. Can you believe that? They can't even like pick up a ball. They're like a piece of macaroni, like 2-finger grip. They don't even know how to do that. They like grab stuff like this with their fat little kid hands. Right? They can't even pinch or grasp. They don't know how to do that. So why don't kids give up? It's because we're wired to not give up and to master a particular skill. So this perfectionism thing, I think, is some of it's hardwired, and then depending on our upbringing, it can really get exacerbated. So Giant German is saying, I work in a sales organization where perfection can make or break a deal. How should I handle striving for perfection and falling short? That's exactly how you should handle it. You can't control whether a deal is perfect. You can just control the deal that you put forward. And the deal that you put forward depends on your efforts. So all you can control is your efforts. So this is kind of weird. So I was working with a Korean esports org a couple of years ago. And I was trying to explain to this person. We never really cleared it up. But I was like, you can't win or lose a game. And then this person was like, yeah, you can. I was like, no, you can't. He's like, yeah, you can. I was like, you can just play the best that you can play, but like someone may be able to play better than you. You can't control that. You can just control what you play. You can control how many hours you practice. You can control what you eat. You can control when you sleep. You can control whether your players are allowed to see their significant others. You can control all those things, but you can't actually control whether you win or lose. And the dude was like, yes, you can. If you do all those things right, you will win. And we had a fundamental, like, philosophical disagreement about what you can and can't control. So I'm of the mind that you can control your actions, you can't control your outcomes. I can try to read it. I can read a textbook every day, but I can't get an A on a test. I can, eat healthy all my life, and I may get diabetes, I may have a heart attack, I may not. So if y'all need a full episode, we cover a lot of this stuff in the ADHD guide. So it's kind of weird because even when we were coming up with it, I was like, they're like, what do you want to call the guide? And I was like, I don't know. It's like just a guide about how to do stuff. It's like we try to do stuff, but we don't know like how to do stuff. Like there's this instrument here that's our mind that keeps us from like doing stuff. So I'm just going to explain how that thing works. That's what the guide's about. And so thankfully my team was great. They're like, let's just call it that. It's like, if you struggle to do stuff, then that's in the guide. So this person who's saying, Duck Gus is saying, brain hurts need a full episode on the subject. And there's way more than a full episode. Doing stuff is not basic. It's very complicated. Okay? Okay. So last thing I wanted to talk to y'all about real quick was, so we actually made a quick modification. We made actually a significant modification to our coaching program. And I just wanted to share with y'all real quick. So this was a post that someone posted 6 days ago, which I think is a really, really good. I like it because it sets the expectations. So I've been watching Healthy Gamer for quite some time, and a while back I decided to give group coaching a try as my own efforts didn't seem enough. So I think this is one key aspect, which is like, sometimes like you can put forth a lot of effort, but you need something to just like help you over the edge. It was remarkable how much of an effect it had on my life. It's taught me so much and helped me digest certain things in my life. After group coaching, I decided I wanted to put all my efforts to the test and do something that I've always wanted to do but have failed. I decided to make a video game and make it available to the public within 3 months. Okay? So this is actually what we look for kind of in our coaching clients. Is oftentimes what happens is they come in and they're like, stuff is not working. And then they'll do coaching for a while, and then they like clarify a goal, and then they set that goal, and then they shoot for it. Sometimes that's more personal coaching. And then that's really what we try to do is we use like all these techniques that we've taught you all today to help you figure out, okay, like what's holding you back and how can you actually accomplish it. And I wanted to share this with y'all as well, because I think this is really important. It took a lot to convince myself that coaching wasn't a waste of money, and it ended up being great, well worth the money, but it's only as useful as you make it. If you don't go out of your way to get something out of it, then it may not be as great. So this is kind of what we find is that you don't have to have a clear goal when you come in, but you need to do the work. So what we really ask you to do is show up. And if you show up, and we're going to start by like understanding you, right? So we can't give you a plan out of the gate. But it's like, let's understand like what's holding you back. Why are you procrastinating? Are you perfectionistic? Let's dig into that. Where does that come from? Which version of that is it? And you're going to hear from other people in group coaching. And we've actually added a pretty cool feature where there's a recommended groups feature, which allows you to pick a group based on what your goals are. So you can work with other people who have that same goal, and y'all can sort of like work through it together. And this is kind of, if y'all notice, like when we talk about a post, right, or there's an interview, your ability to understand what's going on is actually better than the person we're interviewing. You're seeing it from the outside, and we gain insight. It's easier to see our problems and how to fix them if they're held by someone else. So group coaching really leverages that. And right now we've also got where we've got a limited time offer for $25 a session for group coaching. So if y'all are interested, definitely check it out. Questions? Yeah, so Bjorn Toberwild 93 is showing up as 50% of the work, and that's really where we ask you to start. And then what's really cool, like the reason we built this program is precisely to do what this person did, which is we want you to start by showing up, and then we'll help you uncover the motivation. We even teach our coaches a particular technique to set successful goals. That technique is also in the ADHD and Doing Stuff guide, by the way. So this is a technique that's worked for over 10,000 people, and like we'll share the technique with you. It's in the guide. But half of the reason that we screw up, if we think about perfectionism, what's your problem there? The problem is you're setting the wrong goal, so you're dooming yourself to failure. How do you set the right goal? What gets in the way of setting the right goal, right? Why is it that the goals that you set are based on wish lists instead of things that you can actually meaningfully accomplish? And when you set up goals that are wish lists and you fail at them over and over again, what does that do to your motivation? And when you set goals that are accomplishable, what does that do to your motivation? It actually increases it, but setting that goal requires a cognitive lift in the first place because you don't want to set that goal. You don't want to get, if you're failing a class, you don't want to set a goal for a C. That's not going to fix the problem. And so working through all that stuff is like exactly what coaching is for. So definitely check it out. And now with the recommended groups feature, this is something our devs have been working really hard on. It's something that we got a lot of feedback. We actually analyzed a bunch of groups and found that when people are sort of paired up based on shared problems, the outcomes are better. So check it out. These groups are mostly for adults, right? Mostly. But that's where I'd say you can be 16 and you can be 32 and you can have the same problem. Showing up may cause anxiety, but it might be positive in the end. That's actually one of the huge benefits of group. So Juan Diego is saying, I have anxiety when I show up in group. You're damn right. And that's why you need to show up in group, because group will be the one place. So if we kind of think about actions, right? The problem is that when we show up in groups in the real world, our performance has consequences. So it's not a safe place to practice. The cool thing about group is we actually have very strict boundaries, which we encourage, but y'all are free to do it. So we'll say things like, don't play games with people in group. Don't hang out with people in group. We don't want any other relationship besides the group. And why is that? It's because once you start playing games with people, then things get muddy. It no longer becomes a sandbox where you can practice talking to other people. You can practice that tolerance that we talked about. You can actually engage and learn how to listen. So we wouldn't need groups today if our upbringing was different. But now we're at home. There's like a lack of free play. Like we don't get put into socially challenging situations. We can isolate ourselves using technology. And so our social skills have atrophied. Our anxiety has gone up. More people are getting more easily triggered. Anxiety is more easy to evoke. So we need to build up some of that tolerance, and group is an effective way to do it. Last question is, who are we going to raid? Marius Law is saying, how am I going to make myself show up to a group when it's such a daunting task just to click on your stream? So you may not be ready yet. Right? See how far you can get. Approach the sign-up process. And if it's too much, then don't do it. Patience with yourself. Okay, Hassan or Miz? Okay, we're going to raid Hassan. Is Hassan talking about the Trump indictment or something? All right, y'all. Send some love Hassan's way. We'll see y'all next Friday. We're still going to have YouTube uploads, okay? Including a lot of stuff that we kind of talked about today. So there's some more detailed stuff about managing emotions and whatnot. Take care, everybody.